the 15th of March, shortly after 5:30. If we can get a roll call and determination of a quorum, that'd be fantastic.
Chairperson Golden,
Here.
Vice Chair Pulitz,
Here.
Treasurer Rogers, Member Horton, Member Hamilton, Member Hutter, Member Norvell.
Here.
A quorum is present.
Thank you so much. Harlow, could you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, I trust everybody here has had the opportunity to review the minutes from the past Airport Authority meeting. In the absence of any comments on that, I'd entertain a motion to approve those minutes.
So moved. Second?
Okay, motion and a second. All in favor of approving the minutes of the past Airport Authority meeting, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, all opposed? Motion carries, and those minutes are approved. Public comment. Members of the public who wish to address the Airport Authority may speak on an agendized and non-agendized matter related to the airport. Comments are limited to 3 minutes per person per topic, and if your item requires any sort of extended discussion, please request with me to calendar that matter for a future Airport Authority meeting. So if there are any members of the public who wish to address us this evening, now would be an appropriate time. Okay, seeing none, we'll move on. Airport engineers report. Do we have Nadine on the line or Chris? Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Okay, we can do that. One quick thing I will note, as chairman of the Airport Authority, I do reserve the right to modify the agenda as I see fit. And at this time, we may go back to that engineer's report if we deem it necessary. So, moving on from there, we have a consent agenda this evening. I trust everybody here has had the opportunity to review that agenda. Yes?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Anybody want to pull anything off that consent agenda?
Nope.
Okay, fair enough. Entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda as submitted.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the consent agenda as submitted.
Okay, thank you, Harlow. And can we have a second? Thanks, Curtis. We have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda as submitted. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Corey, so did you want me to go to the budget next? That a little more appropriate? Okay, so again, I'm going to reserve the right to mix up the agenda here, and I have that right to do so, for discussion and possible action to review and approve the fiscal year 2023-2024 budget for, and this is a preliminary budget, for submission to the State Department of Taxation. And if you'll recall, we reviewed this in our meeting last month in February, and we're going to be doing this 3 times, I believe. The next time, I believe, is the final one with any revisions. So, Corey, take it away.
Okay, so for this budget item, like Michael said, this is the second review of the preliminary budget before submission to the state. This has to be submitted by the 15th of April. So we won't be able to review this again before that deadline. The previous meeting, there have only been very minor changes to the budget. We adjusted the salaries line item to accurately reflect what we expect the salaries budget to be. That also impacted the workers' compensation line item, the state unemployment contribution, and that is the only changes. Does anyone have any questions for me about the preliminary budget?
Keep in mind, we do have another opportunity to review and revise this as we deem necessary in our April meeting of the Airport Authority. So, any questions or comments on the matter? Okay, if none, we will bring this back next month. Our next meeting, Corey, is what date?
April, let's see. And there's not going to be enough time.
That's what I was worried about.
So this would be the final review of the preliminary budget.
So we need to adopt this preliminary budget at this meeting or call a special meeting for adoption.
Yeah, and actually Steve Takis just let me know that there may not necessarily need to be a special meeting if there are any changes, because the treasurer would have the authority to approve it in that event. Takis, do you have anything to add about that?
Yeah, Steve Takis, Airport Council. The statute just says that our organization needs to file the preliminary budget, which means that the Secretary Treasurer can file the preliminary budget. The critical step is the step that's done in the latter part of May, where you adopt the budget as the final budget. And so it's great if you can approve it right now. It just gives more overhead and coverage to the Secretary Treasurer for filing the preliminary budget with the Department of Taxation. The really critical approval, and it's mandatorily in May. It's not like you can do it in April and cover it for May. It has to be done on specific days in May. It will be in May.
Okay, with that in mind, it would be prudent then to approve this preliminary budget if anybody is so inclined to move to do so.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the preliminary budget as written.
Okay, fair enough.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the preliminary budget as submitted. All in, oh, what's that? We already got the second, but we're good, Paul. Thank you. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. So we can advise John that he can take that to the state and submit it.
All right.
Okay?
Just so you know, Nadine just texted me and she said she is on the line now.
Okay. So again, we're going to revise the agenda ever so slightly. And Nadine, if you could give us a brief engineer's report, that would be helpful.
Hello,
Good
Nadine.
evening,
Do you hear
thank
us?
you.
There, yeah.
Yep, I am here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. It took me a second to unmute there. Let me get to the update here. Page. Okay, so no new real updates on the snow removal equipment. I think from last time, I believe the information is the same there, with the tentative delivery being for September of this year. As far as the nighttime approach system project, we are still planning on bidding phase 3 of that, which is the construction for the PAPI. We were able to get a little bit of an extension for the deadline on that bid. So instead of the May 1st deadline, we're a little bit into May. So we have a little bit more time to get all of our ducks in a row, which is a good sign. And for the snow removal equipment building, we are planning on rebidding that by the May 1st deadline, as far as that's the date for when bids have to be open. And so, Corey, I'm starting to coordinate with you. I don't know if you've looked into it into detail, but we are needing to advertise that project pretty quickly here, and I'll get with you on what's required to do so. But everything should be ready to go on that one as well. Another just side note, we had the ACIP meeting with the FAA at the end of last month. No major issues or questions came up, but everybody, after that meeting, everybody's on track with the ACIP plan as it shows today.
Does anybody have any questions for
there's-
Nadine? Okay, thank you, Nadine. Seeing none.
Thank you.
We will move on to now all of a sudden, there we go. Move on to public hearing number 1, discussion and possible action. Review and approve request from Carson Tahoe Executive to construct a bulk fuel facility on their lease parcel. Utilize a fuel truck as temporary facility while obtaining permits and construction of a permanent facility. Establish a fuel flow rate, and if necessary, amend the lease to allow fuel transfers from the temporary fuel truck facility to determine conditions and compliances. Let me make a statement here. There have been a couple people who have wrongly and inadvertently stated that I have a conflict of interest here, and I will not be recusing myself from the conversation this evening. In fact, I've been advised by legal counsel that I'm well within my right to comment on this matter. However, in the essence of equity, I am going to be abstaining from the vote and turning this matter over to Tim in order for him to run this portion of the meeting.
Thank you, Michael. The way that, so you all know what we understand, by Michael abstaining, he still has the opportunity to present from the gallery his comments, which I feel is a very appropriate way to handle this. So with Mr. Takis's legal advice, that sounds like it was a way we can move forward. So I'd like to go ahead at this point, and I'd like to ask for a staff summary, and we'll move forward.
Okay, this is Corey Jenkins, and I'm essentially just going to read off the executive summary here, so I don't misspeak on anything. So Carson Tahoe Executive has requested the following. A request for approval to construct a bulk fuel facility. Request for approval to distribute fuel via temporary truck-to-truck transfer while permitting and constructing a permanent fuel facility, and also propose a fuel flowage rate to be approved. The supporting materials CTE submitted define all applicable regulations and how they intend to comply with each regulation. CTE also included a letter of support from their fuel provider, Epic Fuels. A reputable fuel provider would not support a fuel project they did not feel like was compliant or could be compliant with all regulations. The draft truck-to-truck operations manual CTE submitted is similar to the manual they have at Reno International Airport for their ongoing temporary truck-to-truck operation that was approved by the Reno Tahoe International Airport and the Airport Rescue and Firefighting Department at Reno. The truck-to-truck operation here in Carson would be slightly different from that operation because it would utilize a temporary containment instead of a pre-existing containment area. What they have submitted on that would meet regulations, which is still subject to review. CTE has submitted sufficient documentation to support a plan to construct a bulk fuel facility and to operate a temporary truck-to-truck operation, subject to compliance with all regulations. The approval of the Carson City Airport Authority would not supersede any other government regulation. CTE will still be subject to approvals from other agencies, including the Carson City Fire Department, the Carson City Building Department, Nevada Department of Agriculture, specifically weights and measures, and also the Federal Aviation Administration. The FAA would only be involved with the approval of the improvement on the airport. So copies of all permits and approvals from all other relevant government agencies must be provided to the airport manager prior to the start of operations. If at any point CTE is found to be operating in violation of any of those regulations, they should cease fuel operations immediately. Fuel delivery trucks will be operating in areas of the airport that are not on the CTE lease parcel. And for that reason, CTE should improve any areas of the airfield if it's necessary to support that fuel truck operation at their own expense. And also any improvements that need to be done, they should submit for approval for those various different improvements that may be required. The fuel flowage fee that was proposed is one that is established in the airport's fee schedule already, which is 5 cents a gallon. The airport has already established that fee, so I don't believe that that is subject to negotiation. And also all providers should be charged the same fee, and that would be the case with the 5 cents per gallon. I think it's really important that the airport authority also consider the legal counsel's briefing, which he has prepared, where he details the potential liability concerns here. And with that, I'll turn it over to Steve.
So Steve Takis, Airport Counsel. Just kind of from an overview standpoint, from both the operational analysis that Corey has done and the legal analysis and liability analysis that I've done, we think that there is adequate evidence there and a well-supported application for you to approve the bulk fuel storage facility. That's the permanent facility. And in addition, the 5 cents per gallon fuel flow fee should also be approved. The lease that gives them the right to put in a fuel facility says that the rate is to be negotiated with the airport authority. We're required to be non-discriminatory in our rates and fees, and so the 5 cents per gallon has already been established. The same one should apply to Carson Tao Executive. The other two pieces of their request are where there's a little bit of a difference. Corey still has addressed, and I believe very well, the operational aspects of the truck-to-truck transfer, which is one of those items. And the other item was an item we added per discussions I had with CTE's counsel to make sure that you are adequately noticed in case you want to proceed with that and want to amend the lease to permit it. The truck-to-truck transfer raises some somewhat unique legal issues. I've identified them in the briefing memo, but just to state them very simply, each one of the FAA grants that we get has certain assurances in it. And one of the assurances is that we will not do any economic discrimination on the airport, which means that similarly placed, similarly situated people need to be treated the same in rates, fees, practices, those kinds of things. We don't have anybody else who is doing fuel sales from a tanker trailer as opposed to a fuel facility. The fuel facility and the one they've designed and the other ones that are on the airport are double wall steel tanks. They're designed so they can withstand impact. There's very little risk that a vehicle or an airplane that would strike them would cause a leak or an explosion of any kind. The same cannot be said for fuel tanker trailers. By necessity, they have to be lighter, so they can't be steel double wall. I mean, there's some physics involved there. So they present a different safety and different liability issue. Now, I'm not here to tell you what the fire regulations are, not my area of expertise. And in my very short conversation with the fire marshal, it's clear to me that that's where those considerations should be. You know, what do the fire codes require? What are those safety elements? That's in his field of expertise, and that's who we should be looking to for that kind of analysis. However, from a bigger analysis, having a single-walled tank stationary on the airport presents a slightly different situation. If a vehicle were to run into a tanker truck, as you've probably seen when you see on TV a vehicle accident involving a fuel tanker, it usually results in a fire and explosion. And that's kind of a unique liability risk that we ordinarily wouldn't have. While it is true that tanker trucks do regularly come onto the airport to deliver fuel to both of the fuel facilities that are in place today, they're only here for a short while. They're not stationary. It would be the same if you were driving across country. Yeah, you'll probably pass some tanker trucks. You have a limited risk there when that happens. But if you were required to drive next to it the entire trip across the country, it might be a very different risk scenario. So that's something you should take into consideration. So I identified four issues that give me concern as your counsel, and I feel obligation to advise you. The first one is a discriminatory treatment. As I said, our assurances, our grant assurances say that we have to make the airport available for public use on reasonable terms and without unjust discrimination to all types, kinds, and classes of aeronautical activities, including commercial aeronautical activities offering services to the public at the airport. And that's what the fuel service is. No one else has been permitted to sell fuel basically out of the back of a truck. Now, I'm paraphrasing that because more precisely, they're bringing the truck in, parking the truck as their storage facility, and then they're transferring fuel from that trailer into their delivery truck in the same way that other fuel providers will use a truck to drive around to get to the aircraft. And so, but no one else has been allowed to do that. And so what it does is it gives an economic advantage to someone who can actually sell fuel without having first constructed the fuel facility. I believe the FAA would look at that as a violation of our grant assurance. I don't know that, but I believe that's the case because it's someone's being treated differently. Somebody's getting better treatment. The second issue, well, the third issue is actually the liability issue, which I mentioned a minute ago. The fact that you've got a single wall tank sitting there instead of a double wall tank, and it's not designed for long-term storage. It's not going to have the same safety attributes, and there is a risk that somebody could hit it with a vehicle or hit it with an aircraft or a projectile of some sort, and we'd have a catastrophe on our hands. And I think you should just take that into consideration. The other two concerns, and these are they're legal issues, but they're probably can be explained somewhat. But the proposal for the permanent fuel facility is all well within the leasehold, and it looks like it's well designed for its location and its use. The temporary containment area shows construction and use of areas that are to the south of the leasehold. And for them to conduct a fuel operation on their leasehold, it has to be on the leasehold. They can't move it off into ramp area or airport controlled area. And so that would need to be addressed. And to see that, if you look at the drawing that was provided by the folks at Bramco, who I'm sure are very good people, it shows both in the hand-drawn and the nicer survey type of exhibit, it shows aggregate and other materials being used for the temporary fuel containment, but that are off the lease area. And then the last one is just the lease terms itself, and To me is the most fixable of the issues. The lease provides that sales can occur and that there is a fuel flowage fee paid to us with deliveries to the bulk fuel facility. Here, we don't have fuel deliveries to a bulk fuel facility during the use of the truck-to-truck transfer. We have a fuel tanker trailer being moved in with a certain amount of fuel in it, and presumably periodically fuel will be added to it, because I'm sure that their hope and their plan is to sell more than one tank full of fuel. But it's hard to fit that into the language of the lease in terms of their obligation. And to me, that's probably the least of the concerns that I have, because I think the lease could easily be amended to say, and to the extent that there's some other form of fuel sales being permitted, it would still be based on the fuel delivered to Carson Tahoe Executive that is turned around and used for sales. It's just the lease didn't anticipate a truck-to-truck transfer thing, so the language doesn't fit very well. So those are the legal concerns. But again, I just want to reinforce the right to construct a fuel facility is theirs already. It's in their lease. And what they've come forward to ask you for approval of is the precise plans, the fuel facility they have designed. And so when you approve their bulk fuel storage facility, you're giving them the ability to take that approval to the next step, whether that is the fire officials, the city for any kind of building permits, the FAA for their Section 163 approval, and anything else. But I think that's an important accomplishment for them to have and to walk out of this meeting with. The temporary containment is more of I don't see that as fitting into that box. It's more of an opportunity for them to sell fuel before they actually have a fuel facility in place. And that's why I think there are some problems with it. And I don't know what the urgent need is to be able to sell fuel before they do their fuel facility. Maybe there's something out there, I just haven't heard what it is. But that appears to me to be economic discrimination. But that's my report. I'll shut up now, but I'll answer any questions you have.
Does anybody have any questions to Steve from the board? Okay, Paul, please.
Historically, has anyone actually wanted a truck-to-truck and then we denied them, or did we just not allow them, or what's the basis of why has no one done that? I don't know enough.
That's a great question, and CTE's counsel asked me that same question too. To my knowledge, no one has ever requested it, and I don't know that. I don't know that anybody's ever requested it, and I've been here since 1989, involved with the airport, and so I would have thought I would have heard about it if it had happened. Each of the fuel facilities, the people make the investment, they build the fuel facility, and then once they have all their permits and it's signed off, they start selling fuel. And that is the way we've treated it for the 3 fuel facilities that are that we have had on the airport. But to answer your question directly, no, I don't believe anybody has ever asked us to do truck-to-truck.
No one's really been denied.
No one's been denied. There's 2 sides to that coin, and CT's counsel, I won't make his argument necessarily for him, but he made a good argument. He said, well, look, if nobody has asked for it before, how is it discrimination for us to ask for it now? And I think that's a good argument, but you need to look at the other side of that coin. If you permit it now you're stuck. You will have to permit it in the future. And so that's a road that you want to think about. You're doing more than just one proceeding when you approve it here. Now, maybe there's ways you can somewhat limit that by tying it to other things, by putting conditions. I mean, the compliances that the airport managers come up with are a good set of compliances. I think they will provide you with all the assurances you need that this thing is safe and meets all the codes. But once you approve it for somebody, you can't later, it'd be really hard for you later to say no to somebody else. I think that's the concern.
Okay, thank you, Steve. Anybody else? No? I just want to add, I'd like to add a comment for all of us in this room that there was some suggestion that, to me, over the last few days, that our legal counsel, Mr. Takis's approach to this was somewhat hostile. And I have to let you know from my perspective as a board member, we rely on our legal counsel to point out every possible risk and every possible legal entrapment that we could possibly have to deal with down the road. And for him not to give us all of his observations and all of his comments would be harmful for the board. And I appreciate the fact he's giving us food for thought. Now, what I would like to do at this point, I assume because of the attendees in the room, that there will be some people that would like to come up and speak to this issue. Perhaps they want to speak just in general for the application, or to speak to Mr. Takis's 4 items that he is concerned about. So at this time, unless there's any other board requirements, I'd like to go ahead and open up the floor to our attendees, if anybody would like to speak. Yes, sir. Oh, okay. See, I'm a rookie at this. Would the applicant's representative like to come up, or is 1, 2, 3, or 4, whatever? Come on up, please. Just push the little green button on your mics and.
Good evening. I forgot to state my name last time I was up here in this seat, so I'm Brad Cost with Stellar Aviation.
Bruce Carrad with Carson Tahoe Executive.
Rob Howie with Carson Tahoe Executive.
And James Pickett with Carson Tahoe Executive.
I think we'll probably, I believe we'll address each point of your council's, I don't want to say opposition, but his perceptions to the project. I believe we'll start with the liability issue with Brad, who will walk us through some of the safety concerns that were raised, along with examples of where this particular type of containment is being used throughout the country. And then I'll follow up with some additional comments in terms of the economic discrimination as well as the lease issues.
And just to add, Board Member Hutter is online now, so he's going to be able to hear this presentation.
Excellent. Thank you, Vice Chair. So first off, I'd like to thank your staff, your council, for all of the hard work that they put into everything, because they were very, very thorough on all of their questions and getting all the information from us, and we are grateful to be here before the board. There are a couple of points I'd like to clarify after I listen to council's concerns, because they're valid concerns, and we want to address them and make sure everybody's comfortable with them. The first is there is not a trailer truck being brought onto airport property that's going to sit on the airport property. It's a fuel truck, the same fuel trucks that are currently on the operation right now for your existing facilities. It's the same exact, actually ours is a lot newer. It's about a $300,000 truck. And that truck will be used not only to hold fuel when it's delivered, but dispense it into aircraft. So it is a certified fuel truck, regulated by the fire codes, regulated by the fire department, that's actually driving on airport property just like the other trucks are. Same insurance, same everything else. So from a liability standpoint, there's not a trailer out there that someone's gonna do a Mad Max and blow up on the sidewalk. That's not what's going on. It's a 7,000 gallon fuel truck identified in the paperwork we submitted to you. Clearly, that is a fuel truck for dispensing fuel and complies with every regulation and every guideline that the fire code people would have. So that's the first thing that I'd like to clarify. It is not a trailer truck. That's the first thing. So there's not a truck that's sitting out there in front of the property, so to speak. The second thing that I'd like to talk about is when we first came, and I think it was board person, Mr. Hutter, had said that we want to talk about the truck-to-truck transfer, and I believe council's comment was it's not allowed on any airport in the United States. Well, that's not true. It's being done right now on hundreds of airports throughout the United States. It is commonplace and commercial practice when you're building a fuel farm to do truck-to-truck transfers. I can give you examples of multiple airports right now that it's being done at. Santa Rosa, California is using the same exact system that we're doing. I've got probably another 10 that I can list. Detroit at the International Airport, Astoria, Oregon, Bend, Oregon, Chenault Field in Louisiana, Taunton, Massachusetts, Delaware, Ohio, Greene County, Ohio, Boeing Field. Actually, Boeing's doing this. So, in Mather Field in California as well. California's got the strictest regulations of any airport around the United States. In addition to that, obviously, you know that we've been doing it in Reno. We've already done truck-to-truck transfers while our fuel farm is being built as an interim to our fuel farm being built to allow the airport to have access to $25 million worth of development. The reason that they put us in business was so that we could start our business to cultivate it, get our customers comfortable with coming in and out of the airport so that we could invest our money in the airport and know that our investment was going to be protected. So this is not someone that's just coming to operate out of the back of a truck like I just heard, because that to me is a little bit offensive when we're getting ready to propose spending over $100 million at this airport, especially with the investment that CT is looking to put into property and everything else. Another thing that I'd like to speak to, if I could briefly, is that there's, I don't know the exact amount, and I'll let council speak to that here, but there's already been over probably $7 to $10 million invested in this airport. So for you to say that we're going to have an economic advantage by operating out of a truck-to-truck transfer as opposed to a fuel farm, I'd like to really understand that methodology for that argument, because I haven't seen that type of investment being done. The second thing is that Corey did a very good job, the airport manager, of tying the truck-to-truck transfer program to timelines associated with construction of the fuel farm. Is an interim process that's done while the fuel farm is being constructed and while we're going through the permitting process. Allows us to get our development started, allows us to get everything going in Carson City and get the airport where it needs to be. So from a liability standpoint, because that was the original question, and getting back to that, I talked to the containment people that are doing the contemporary containment today, and I was extremely impressed after talking to them. They have these systems in place right now at 5 of the airports in Hawaii, including Honolulu International, Koa, Hawaii Koa, Hilo International Airport, Kailua Airport. I'm going to totally butcher some of these names. They're doing the same exact containment for NASA, the U.S. Marine Corps, the Air Force, the Army, and even the Coast Guard. So in Nevada alone right now, at the 2 missile ranges and at the military bases, they're using these same exact systems. So this is it's not something that's somebody's just made up and we're coming with an idea to the board that is not commonplace in the industry, not only from a government situation, but also from a private situation. Bless you. So the second thing on a liability standpoint, we're going to be regulated just like the FBOs are currently at the airport by the fire department. Nothing is going to be dispensed. Nothing is going to be set up. Nothing will be approved until a fire marshal and his office and the city offices that we just spoke about are completely comfortable with everything. And I'd really, again, I go back to your airport manager. The staff has looked over this completely. He's looked through everything we have. He's spoken to the professionals, probably been a little bit more thorough than I would have liked him to be because I provided him a lot of information, but he's done an exceptional job in preparing this for the board so that you guys can make an educated decision. But when it comes to the liability associated with projectiles and fuel trucks being hit by cars and whatever the other accusations are, this is done at every airport in the United States, the same exact equipment. The trailer truck coming is the same exact trailer truck delivering to your FBOs. They're delivering fuel to a certified truck for the airport that is inspected by the fire department, approved by the fire department, that we use to distribute into the aircraft coming into our facility. So at no point in time is there a trailer sitting on the airport. That's just not the way this is operated, and that's why we put into our plan. So I don't see how the liability is any different than any other operation that you have on the airport, especially because it's given it's on containment. And I will pass it back to you.
Thanks, Brad.
Thank you. So a couple of additional comments.
Could you state your name, please?
Oh, excuse me. Rob Howie.
Thanks, Rob.
A couple of additional comments moving on to the lease and the leasehold issues that were raised by your council. In one respect, I do agree with your council in respect to the lease, that is the most easily fixed issue. I don't necessarily entirely agree with his interpretation of the lease. I don't believe it's necessary to be amended. I don't believe that the distribution of fuel is tied to the need to have a fuel facility. I believe it grants the right to distribute fuel, and the lease is silent as to how, when, or how that fuel will be distributed. There is also a right to construct a fuel facility. But beyond that, I do believe if there is a need for an amendment, that will be an easy fix. And that is something that CTE is on board with fixing or clarifying, might be the better term, to allow for a temporary truck-to-truck transfer situation. In terms of the leasehold location, Corey again did an exceptional job, and Ty gave us a very easy path forward in that if the containment system has to go outside of the leasehold area, Carson Tahoe can obviously pay to restore any area in which it has to go. A second option is to simply lease out that additional square footage that would be required. If I do recall the history of this lease, which predates me, I believe that property was within our lease at one point, was then taken back by the airport for a road to be used, which never took place. There's nothing stopping us from putting that property back into the lease if necessary. So there's multiple paths forward on that front. In terms of the economic disparity or the discrimination issue, that's the one that I take a little more seriously. Mr. Hamilton, I think, hit it on the head when he said that nobody else, or at least to nobody's recollection, nobody has taken this path, has never asked to take this path, and therefore has never been denied in taking this path. To suggest that Carson Tahoe should be denied simply because somebody else elected not to take this path, that's not discrimination. Keep in mind that Carson Tahoe is not getting a free handout here. We've already invested millions of dollars into this project. We invested millions of dollars into this FBO. We will be investing significantly more money into the permanent facility, and we're going to be investing money into this temporary facility, all of which we have to pay on day one. If you'll recall back in August of this past year, there was a lengthy discussion about truck-to-truck transfers. And at that board meeting, it was stated, so long as Carson Tahoe can meet the environmental requirements, the fire code requirements, and incur their own cost, there's no reason and nothing prohibiting them from doing truck-to-truck transfers here at this airport. Nothing in the lease, nothing in Title 19. Also, when you look through council's comments and his memos, he talks about situations where prior distributors have had to make an investment in their permanent facilities before being able to sell a single fuel of gas, and have never taken this temporary path. I don't believe everything in here is accurate. For example, Carson Tahoe Aviation and the first fuel island on the airport was not built by Carson Tahoe Aviation. I believe, if my history is correct, and the research on this is correct, it was actually paid for by public money, and the first fuel facility was built by the city or the county. Carson Tahoe Aviation simply stepped into a lease and was able to utilize it. Most recently, I believe most members on the board will know that the current fuel facility had to be relocated. That fuel facility is now sitting under the flag of Mountain West Aviation. When it was relocated, that was also done with public money, but it was also upgraded and became basically a state-of-the-art system and a much improved system than what it was previously. That used public money as well. So to suggest that Carson Tahoe is getting an economic advantage to compete with the sole fuel provider who has also benefited from some public money towards his fuel facility seems disingenuous, and I don't believe can be supported. Tim, I believe I'll turn the time back over to you unless Bruce has any other
All right,
comments.
thank you. Bruce, do you have something to say? Please state your name.
Bruce Carrod, Carson Tahoe Executive. Just to expand a little bit on what Rob had said, as far as the genesis of when infrastructure was put in for any fuel farm, bulk fuel facility, I think when Ormsby County and Carson City consolidated, a lot of that existing infrastructure was already on the airport. So your barrier to entry to be a fuel provider at that point in time was very limited if you were able to take over an existing lease. And I do feel that though the current operator did purchase a dated tanks, underground fuel tanks that were replaced at the cost of either the city and the FAA, and then to have a new facility that is up to current codes, that is what would be the latest and greatest, and would I would say postpone having to update any of the infrastructure that again was not paid for by that fuel provider is where this discriminatory language, I think, isn't accurate. And not to make any accusations, but some of the language and some of the verbs I think are a little flowery to already be accused of having predatory pricing when we haven't even been able to sell anything. And also that we've bought an FPO, made the investment almost 2 to 3 years ago, and have yet to have a return on any of our investment. Us requesting this is allowing us to build up our business and continue to expand.
I would like to comment, Bruce, that his comment didn't accuse you of predatory pricing. He just mentioned that it opens the door for that to occur. So
Understood.
And he just wanted the board to get to see the whole picture of what is out there, and that's what how I read it. So I don't think it was meant to be.
Understood, Vice
Yeah,
Chair, and I
yeah.
apologize if and it was nice that there was a comment by council that he would not, that we would not engage in this. But
Right.
I do think that when there's a single individual that's selling fuel and there's no other competition at the airport, and when someone else tries to come in and to also be a fuel provider, that this non-discriminatory doesn't apply to us. So I will turn it back over to you, and
All right, thank you.
thank you, Vice Chair.
James.
James Pickett. Real quick, 3 quick, just kind of add-on items, and maybe Brad can help me with one. First off, in regards to this economic advantage, I think we've kind of tackled that well, but wanted to point out that even if there was an economic advantage, it would disappear very quickly if we're not putting in the investment in building the fuel farm. The last thing is, 2 things I'll need Brad's help on is the predatory pricing. He can kind of maybe give you a little bit of insight there. That's certainly not our business plan. And the last one that I also want Brad's help on is, I think Steve brought this up, is the need of having this interim temporary truck-to-truck transfer while the fuel facility is being built. That is very important in that investment. As Brad pointed out, it's done at multiple airports as a temporary thing, and in some airports, even a permanent way to distribute fuel. But I'll let him kind of comment on the pricing of the fuel and really why it's an absolute need for us to at least get going in fuel sales and in sending aircraft down to the airport while we're building this fuel facility.
Thank you, Mr. Pickett. Mr. Cost?
Thank you. So we, whether it's a blessing or not a blessing, we have a facility that's 30 miles up the road. That facility, we're pumping close to 3 million gallons a year out of that facility now. We started there 3 years ago and basically have solved a lot of problems for the airport. We broke ground on a new $25 million project, an expansion that's completely funded, and I'm proud to say is pretty much sold out at this point. So to cash flow that investment, obviously, I can't even delve into being the low price person. I can't do that. It would never cash flow. It doesn't make any business sense. So we can't come down the road 30 miles where I have a huge demand from existing customers in Reno that want to be in Carson and they want to come to our facilities and would like to be down here, but they aren't currently, and try and entice them by coming down for cheaper fuel, because that will take all of the customers I have in Reno and bring them all to Carson City. As much as everybody on the board would be happy about that, my investors would never put up with that or tolerate it. So I do have a balancing weight that kind of keeps my pricing in check. I don't want to get into too many details of business plans or business models, but with the amount of investment that we have to put into Carson City and with the amount of investment that we're putting into Reno, it'd be far-fetched for anybody to say that we're going to come to this airport and basically delve in that area. We are not a low-cost fuel provider. That's not who we are. It's about quality of service. It's about amenities. It's about growth. It's about relationships, things along those lines. It's not to say that I'm not going to provide value for customers here, but I can tell you my pricing that I have now, if you go on the internet, this is public, so I can speak about it. It's probably $2 a gallon more than it is here in Carson City.
Just a little under one.
Well,
I just
unless
checked
somebody.
you out this morning.
Well, it depends on what you're actually looking at, because if you look at some of the self-serve avgas pricing, my retail app pricing, it's over $2.
Full service, I was looking at full service Jet A, you're about 95 something cents above.
Okay, so
what's
it's
here.
$1 there or $2. We can,
Yeah.
anyways, we can,
Just
semantics.
letting you know we're watching.
I'm glad you're doing your homework, though. That's good, Tim. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
And Mr. Vice Chair, it's something that I know I'm very passionate about, because we've been doing this for 30 years. And we've built over 1 million square foot of facilities. We've built over 15 terminal buildings. We've done over $100 million worth of investment at airports. This is what we do. And you simply can't cash flow those type of investments by offering that type of pricing. It's just not possible to do.
Anybody else from the CTE group? I have a couple comments, questions, and maybe the board might as well. So do you guys mind if I start off? Okay, the first one, pretty simple. Brad, and this pretty much is to you. This has to do with pricing there was a previous statement you made to us, and I'm not holding you to making this a contract, but you said that you intended most likely to price similar to Reno, your pricing. Is that pretty much your intent?
That is correct.
Okay, that's what I
It
thought,
has
because
to
there was a
tie
discussion.
it has to tie together, because I have to be fair to both entities.
That was the discussion we had had, and I'm not going
Yeah.
to make this a contract or have you, but I'm just saying that was your intent.
Yeah.
That's what the board wanted to hear. The second thing, this is to James. I can't recall if it was you, James, or Bruce that had discussed with us in one of our meetings where I was lamenting on the fact that we're spending so much money on our legal fees to deal with all of your applications and so forth. And you had mentioned that you would be willing to discuss possibly remunerating us for some of our legal costs associated with this. I want to know if that was still on the table.
I think we would definitely be amenable to that.
Okay.
And I did notice there was, in the budget, a slight increase in that, and it is somewhat the cost of doing business, so.
Okay.
We
I'm
would
not
be
going to hold you
agreeable.
I'm not going to hold you to a dollar amount. I'm just,
Yeah, I'd only like to add to that. I mean, we obviously have a lot of different ventures and activity at the airport, and we understand that's a drag on a very small legal budget amount already.
correct.
So we understand to help get these things along. We're open to that.
Okay, I would just recommend you deal directly with our airport manager on that and come up with something with he'll be working with our council, and you can come up with a plan going forward that would be reasonable and fair to all concerned, okay? Yes, sir. Yes. Oh, okay, thank you, Michael. Very good, yeah, he's got a lot more years on this than I do, but I knew that was discussed, and I want to make sure that we all understand that was part of the initial discussions. Okay, that's my questions. Anybody else?
Mr. Vice Chairman. Mr. Cost, one of the things that I guess I'm concerned about is our grant assurances. That's an important thing. And I think you said that you have a similar facility or had operated a temporary facility in Reno. Is that correct?
That is correct, sir.
And I would assume that the Reno Tahoe Airport Authority is concerned about their grant assurances.
Absolutely. There's a lot at stake for them.
And they approved your facility. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
If this is a good time, and I don't know, I hope I can be heard okay.
Hear you loud and clear, Carl, go ahead.
Great, thank you. And I apologize for not being here for the start of the meeting, extenuating circumstances. So to that end, I'm going to apologize for taking people's time to perhaps ask a question that maybe has been answered in another context, but it does concern the clarification that our applicants made with regard to the nature of the proposed temporary fueling facility or truck-to-truck transfer. As was clarified, and thank you for doing that, this is not a single wall semi-trailer being parked for that purpose. It was mentioned that instead it's a 7,000 gallon fueler. And I just wanted to get a little more clarification around how that process works. Are we talking about basically driving the fuel truck that was mentioned down from Reno, where it was filled at the existing fuel farm and then brought to the Carson Airport to conduct fueling into aircraft? Or are we talking about parking it and then indeed doing truck-to-truck transfer from that truck to yet another truck and then into aircraft? And if that's the case, then how does the first truck get fueled and how does the fuel get onto the airport?
That's an excellent question, and these are all very, very important items so that everybody's completely in the understanding of the way the process works. So much like your existing fuel provider gets a delivery of fuel, and they order a fuel load, could be approximately 8,000 gallons of fuel. That fuel truck then comes onto airport property, delivers the fuel to the fuel farm, and then exits through airport property. Right, so it's not uncommon. Common, it's done every time. The only thing that's different in our scenario is that fuel truck comes onto airport property, pulls onto a containment area, and fuels a 7,000 gallon refueler, which is a standard refueling truck you're going to see at any larger airport anywhere in the United States. So it's the truck, delivery truck, same trucks that are coming on the airport now, same insurances, same everything else, but delivering to a fuel truck, which is a mobile refueler. So it's set up to go out and then fuel whatever airplanes come in. So that's hopefully clarifies that question. And it's important to note too, from an economic standpoint, there may be a little bit less money associated just initially with the temporary construction, the fuel farm, but you have to order the tanks for the permanent fuel farm. You have to order everything else. So at the end of the day, we're going to be probably into this for more than anybody else very soon. But I have to pay a premium, or CTE has to pay a premium for doing truck transfers in the method that I just told you. So we pay more for freight for the fuel because it's a partial load. It's not a full load. And because of the methodology associated with it, they charge you more for that. So my cost of fuel is actually prohibiting me from discounting the fuel because it's actually going to be more expensive. I just will have it there for our customers so they can actually use the airport and come into the airport. And thanks for allowing me the time to clarify that.
And thank you for your explanation on both of those points. Appreciate it.
Is that it, Carl?
For the moment, yes.
Okay, I think we have someone else on the board that'd like to have questions. Anybody? That was it? Okay. No one else? Paul.
So what is the urgent need to get this truck-to-truck going? You may have answered that already, but just to clarify.
I can tell you from the standpoint of the development standpoint, you have to cultivate a business and you have to start a business and you have to allow your customers to come in. And CT has invested a significant amount of money in the FBO without being able to get any revenue back. We've had a building sitting empty on the airport for over 2.5 years, right? So the truck-to-truck transfer allows us to transfer some of the customers that are up in Reno right now that are eventually going to be having hangars here and are going to be based here so that they can use the airport. They're very, very excited about doing that. Right now, they can't do that because they can't, I mean, they could go to Mountain West, I guess, and get fuel, but a lot of people are very loyal to the company and to the brand, and they want to get us set up for operation. The amount of fuel is probably going to be very limited over the first, I would say, 4 to 5 months, but just because of the fact that it takes a little bit of time to build. But right now, without having the fuel here, I can't bring the rental car companies in. I can't start to provide all of the services that we do for them. We do hotels for them. We do the restaurant bookings for them. We do everything. They're not coming to the airport. That means they're not coming to Carson City. The fuel is the key to getting them to come here. They can't come in here if they can't get service. So that's the immediate need on my end. And also, when we're talking about the significant amount of investment over time, if we were not allowed to do this up in Reno right now, they had a problem because they had one FBO on the airport. That FBO had a lot of customers that were not exactly so happy, right? I'm not saying it's the same thing here, but what they needed to do is they wanted to bring competition into the airport. And they went through the RFP process, they went through all the selection process, they went through financial vetting, they went through everything, and then they awarded us the lease. But part of that lease package was the allowing us to do truck-to-truck transfers so that we could start in business, to get things cultivated, to start building the business, and start to satisfy some of the customers that may have had a little different need. And that's where we have really, really excelled up in Reno, is we have, if I put together for the board, the fuel flowage fees for the airport, and since we came in, if you go back to 2019, I believe there's a 30% increase in fuel flowage at the airport if you go back to pre-COVID, and that has brought in millions of dollars in additional revenue, not only to the community and to the city of Reno, but especially to the airport. I mean, that balances budgets. That provides for snow removal equipment. It provides for everything that's out there, because it's not just the fuel flowage numbers, it's all the other services we provide. We provide de-icing. We provide servicing for scheduled airline service, non-scheduled airline service, military, medevac, everything. We provide support for all of that. We would never have been able to do that if we weren't put in the business of operating for the truck-to-truck. And again, I'm happy to answer any questions that I possibly can. I'm passionate about this, but it's a pathway to get the investment dollars in the community.
Thank you.
Mr. Vice Chairman. Oh, go ahead.
Right now, I'm looking at the jet price, $779 Reno, $669 Carson. So why are they going to come down here if we can be pricing it close to Reno? Why would they come here?
Because you are much closer to the money. There's a lot of people that have businesses here, and there's a lot of people that have homes up at the lake, and this is the most direct access. Right now, I have probably 20% of my customers land in Reno and drive right by the Carson Airport to go to their homes.
Go ahead, James, if you have something to say.
I'd like to add to that too, that it's also the services that Stellar offers. You know, that magnitude of service, whether it's a rental car, restaurants, a lobby that we're doing improvements for, that's important.
Thank you. Anybody else on the board?
Mr. Vice Chairman.
Go ahead, Mr. Norvell.
Mr. Koss, just for the public that may be listening in and may not have looked at all of these documents, what is the cash outlay for the permanent facility? What will that cost you to build?
Do I have to go on record in front of these guys?
Well, it's
no,
in the
it's-
it's in the
No,
document.
I'm joking, of course, but the outlay for this project itself will be somewhere around $750,000 to $1 million. All depends on the cost of some of the materials.
Thank you.
Anybody else? With that, thank you for clarifying your application. And if I do this correctly, Mr. Golden, I can open this up to public comment? Okay, then I'm opening this up to public comment, and who'd ever like to come speak, please come forward.
Thank you so much, Interim Chair. Michael Golden, and not in the capacity of Chairman of the Airport Authority at the moment. I do want to state for the record that the reason why I abstained from this, which I would have preferred not to because I support most of it, was due to the perception that there's a conflict of interest. I want to state for the record, I have never done business with any of these individuals sitting back here, although I talk to Brad periodically. They've never spent any money with me. I've never spent any money with them. There's a perceived conflict of interest because I'm the managing partner at two different companies that operate on the Carson City Airport. And again, for the record, and I want to make this very clear because it was misstated by Mr. Howie and Bruce back there, the fuel providers at this airport, there are two right now, two separate companies. They are not the same companies. Our council and our airport manager can attest to that. They are two completely different ownership groups. They operate under the same trade name. And I think that point of clarification needs to be made. I hate to do this, but I have to speak the truth. And as you know, Tim, I am really a property rights advocate, being a landlord and former real estate developer. And the lease that CTE was assigned has given them the right to construct a fuel storage facility. And on that matter, in and of itself, based upon the plans that have been submitted to the Airport Authority, again, it's unfortunate that I have abstained because I would vote for it. And I would encourage the Airport Authority to vote for the construction of that permanent fuel storage facility. That right is there. The real issue that comes up, and it's unfortunate nobody from the Airport Authority thought about this, but the real issue that comes up with the construction of that permanent fuel storage facility is that currently that particular parcel of land is on the ALP designated as an executive hangar. So if the Airport Authority votes to approve it, which again, I would encourage you to do, you are foregoing an executive hangar being built there. And Corey can tell you, we need to go to the FAA and revise our ALP because that's not what is designated there, but that's a logistical matter, easily resolved. It's really up to the discretion of the airport what to do there. There was something, though, that did bother me about this proposal. There have been 4 separate fuel providers with 4 distinct fuel storage locations at Carson City Airport over the years. Our council said there were 3. There were actually 4 different locations, Steve, if you recall. Now, I can't speak to the first one, but I can speak to the other 3. Each one of them had to make their investment and spend a lot of money to build their fuel storage facilities before they could dispense 1 ounce of fuel. And that's where our council brought to light the matter of economic discrimination. Mr. Howie wrongly stated that when our operation was relocated and we built a new facility, that was all done with public funds. Well, it was partially done with public funds. Partial, not fully. And there was a reason it was relocated. The FAA mandated it. The FAA paid for the relocation, or their portion of it. What Mr. Howie also didn't state, which is really disappointing but not surprising, because he wasn't here, he didn't know. That operation was put out of business for about 6 months as a result of the runway being shortened first down to 3,000 feet, which Harlow, I'm sure you remember that. I know Steve would remember that. And then the runway being completely closed. And the only way to fairly compensate that business enterprise was to relocate it and reach an agreement with the FAA. So you're hearing one side of the story there, which is not 110% accurate. What's most troubling about this proposal is that the applicant has conditioned it upon this temporary fuel storage. And I'm disappointed in that, because in this regard, I have to speak out to it. You heard that, you know, the applicant would like to cultivate their business without making the investment. They said to us all this evening, it's what they'd like to do. What I found interesting was that what wasn't in their package that I'm holding right here is their request for FAA Section 163 determination. This was prepared by their consultant, Kaufman and Associates. Have it right here, dated January 25th. I'm sure you've seen that, Brad. Let me read it to you, if you wouldn't mind. I'm going to read an excerpt. Construction of the fuel storage is anticipated to begin in the second quarter of 2023. That would be sometime between April and June, and be completed within 75 days. Sounds reasonable to me. Why the urgency to have a temporary fuel storage facility operating when you're talking about 75 to 150 days, give or take? Why put our FAA grant funding at risk for a violation of grant assurance number 22 for 150 to 160 days? Because they put in writing right here that that's their plan. This is what's been submitted. It wasn't submitted this evening in our package. That said, it does put the applicant in an unfair economic advantage. Now, one of the other things you heard, and this is a point of clarification, and I'm sure Mr. Cost would concur, all it is point of clarification. The reason why the fuel pricing at Reno is higher than here is due to the flow fee and your operating costs at Reno. Your flow fee is considerably higher in Reno. I think there's additional funds that you pay to the airport based on revenue you generate. But in any event, the flow fee that's being proposed at 5 cents is equitable. because that's what the two existing fuel providers pay at present. And just like it would be an unfair economic advantage to charge this applicant more than 5 cents, it would be an unfair economic advantage to let them operate with a temporary fuel storage facility. It should be noted that in Reno, and I just learned this from our airport manager, he could embellish on this a little more. When Stellar has been operating temporarily, they were operating at a facility that was already constructed, and they had their tanks in a retention area. Is that correct, Brad? So was it a? We said that earlier. Yeah, okay. So they were there at an existing facility operating, a little different than what's being proposed here. Whatever they did, they did. They were also operating there temporarily for a number of years. It was not a matter of weeks or months. So again, I asked the question rhetorically, if the applicant's telling us this, 75 days to build, and they're going to be building in the second quarter, why are we putting our grant funding at risk by violating grant assurance number 22? Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Golden. Is there anybody else in the audience that would like to come up and speak to any of these items? Absolutely.
So first off, the reason that our fuel farm was delayed was we had a little issue called COVID, and the FAA was shut down. And I'm not using that as an excuse. I'm using it as reality. When you cannot get any answers or decisions out of government entities, it's extremely difficult to meet your timelines. We did everything humanly possible to get there. Believe me, for us, it's something that's extremely important that we have the proper fueling mechanisms to satisfy our customers' needs. So that was not a delay on Stellar's part. Fuel flowage fee and pricing, I'm not going to get into our cost basis, but the board chair has obviously got bad information. We pay a flowage fee up at the airport that's a few pennies more than what you're proposing here tonight, but it's not anything significant. And I believe he was referring to a gross receipts. There is nothing on fuel. So the only thing that there's a little difference in freight here, as we said earlier. The freight to Carson's a little bit further. It's a little bit harder to get to. I'm not really too sure exactly what that differential would be. But as far as the investment goes and the timeline that was submitted to the FAA for a NEPA submittal, which, by the way, we sent back in January, and the reason you're talking about why we need to get into business here, it's now March, and that hasn't even been submitted yet. So as far as a fuel farm, I'm certainly aware that although we think we can get the permitting done and we can get 75 days to do construction because the tanks are ordered or will be ordered here shortly, there's always potential for delays in building that timeline up. But that's why I think the airport manager did a very, very good job and was very thorough in putting together timelines that kept us on track. And in meetings with the fire marshal to go through things, the fire marshal also said that there will be timelines, in his opinion, on this project, and if those timelines are not met, he will not allow the truck-to-truck transfers to continue because it is an interim basis. And as far as the economic disparities, I'm not an attorney, and you have an excellent one. And the comments back and forth are, for me, is very educational. I'm learning a lot as we go, but I will tell you this. There's a bigger economic disparity here because we've been here for 2 years and we are still not in business. There's a reason for that. So we are coming here humbly asking for board approval to just conceptually go forward with this project so that we can put it in the hands of the professionals, the fire department, the building engineers, the city, all their departments to review everything and make sure that everything is exactly where it needs to be. And there is no given that they're going to approve this. We have got to meet all of their regulatory hurdles, and we know that. And the fire marshal was very, very clear with me about everything that needs to be done. Last thing I want to make as far as a comment goes, the truck-to-truck transfer area that we designated is within the leasehold. It meets every setback requirement. There is nothing that penetrates and comes onto airport property. What we put in there was stabilizing gravel so that we could make sure that the trucks that were going into that site did not have to drive through the gate, through the ramp area, through all of the airplanes, and then come around the building. It's the best place for the trucks to access. In talking to the airport manager, he agreed, but he did say that any improvements to get trucks in through that area, to get in there, are going to have to be on CTE's checkbook, so to speak. And we agreed to that. But there is nothing on the truck-to-truck transfer pad or anything that's there that's on property that's not on our leasehold. And it meets all of the setbacks. Even the fire marshal clarified that.
Thank you, Mr. Cost. Any other comments from the board? Mr. Norvell?
Well, I'd just like to pursue a little bit this concern about the grant assurances. I want to make sure that we have that right and have a good understanding of it. I want to ask a question, I suppose, of our airport manager or council, but has there ever been a time on this airport that anybody knows of that any fuel provider has ever been restricted from applying for truck-to-truck transfer? In other words, has everybody, whoever provided fuel in the airport, had an equal opportunity to apply for truck-to-truck transfer, but for some reason chose not to do so? If the opportunity was there for everybody to do it, I'm trying to see how it's discriminatory if one company decides that they want to apply for that privilege and spend the money to do so. Secondly, I go back to the Reno Tahoe Airport. If you look at the FBOs in Reno, Jet West, Truckee Meadows, Reno Jet Center, Mercury Air Center, that all of those or any of those use truck-to-truck. If they didn't, and Stellar Aviation has used truck-to-truck, then did they endanger their grant assurances? The Reno Tahoe Airport Authority must have vetted that when they allowed Stellar Aviation to do truck-to-truck transfer up there. That question must have come up again. And when you look at the grant money that that airport has received and which it continues to need, that has to be substantial. So I would like to, talk this out as far as our board and our staff is concerned to make sure that we understand where where we are at with respect to our grant assurances. Hyperbole notwithstanding. I'm having a hard time seeing how we endanger our grant assurances. Nobody's ever been restricted from applying for truck-to-truck.
Let me just respond again to clarify what I said earlier. I'm not aware of anybody ever asking. I kind of think I would have heard about it if they had. And so the fact that no one has asked, your argument is, well, if they had that opportunity, why is it any different for these guys? That's a good argument. I understand that argument. But keep in mind that if you go down that path and you allow it here, now you're committed to that. You're committed to truck-to-truck.
So is Reno. They allowed it.
And they may be, and it may make more sense for them. And if you look at the truck-to-truck transfer situation that Stellar was operating in Reno, it was in an existing fuel, basically abandoned old bulk fuel storage facility. I mean, it was permanent. It was a permanent facility where they were using that as their staging area. I learned a lot from Mr. Kost's description of the refueling here that's different than what I understood from reading their application. But you know, the bottom line is, you're, I don't want to see you guys set yourself up for a failure in the future. I really don't. And
Well-
that is the flip side of that coin.
So Mr. Cost read a list of airports all over the country that have used this procedure. Did they all lose their grants?
Well,
Their grant money?
we don't know what the circumstances are in each of those airports. We only know about our own airport. And so just like Mr. Cost said that I had said, and I probably misstated if I really did say this, that they aren't doing truck to truck anywhere. If I stated that, that's a misstatement on my part. I know that not to be true because I know of truck to truck operations, and I know of some that have gone horribly bad for airports where there have been large environmental damages and other problems. But just as I may have misstated, I heard Mr. Cost state that truck to truck transfers, quote, are being done in every airport in the United States. And I don't think he meant that in a literal sense, just like I wouldn't have either. He's basically saying it's fairly common. I don't know what the numbers are. I only know what's here in Carson City. And so
It's a relatively,
for you to say, you know, well, they're doing it at a bunch of other places, therefore it's okay. Here, you need to actually have the rest of the facts to see where you have an apples to apples comparison. I don't have that information.
I mean, anybody that built a fuel facility here could have come to the airport authority and said, because of the amount of time that it's going to take to construct our facility, we would like to do truck-to-truck transfer so that we can begin dispensing fuel. But as we just discussed, nobody did. Nobody has. I mean, I have been involved with the airport authority this is my 22nd year, not as long as some, but long enough to kind of understand a little bit what has happened on the airport. I'm struggling a little bit trying to see how it would be discriminatory to allow this.
Hey,
Thank you.
this is Corey Jenkins. I do have some things to add to that. So I've seen what a bad truck-to-truck operation looks like. I have that experience in my background, and that's something that we have to make sure doesn't happen here at this airport. And what we're talking about here is what is possible in the future, not what is currently in place at the airport. If somebody, you know, just to throw an example of what could happen, you know, the current vacant hangar on the airfield is currently moving forward really well with a really reputable person and company, but in the future that could end up going back out to bid again. Another FBO could win that bid contract, and with very little experience and without us knowing their background, win the bid, and then come in the day after they occupy that building with a fuel truck and start trying to sell fuel on the airfield because the airport authority has allowed it in the past. And we need to make sure that the airport does not put itself in a position where that's a possibility. I believe that I've addressed that with the conditions that I recommend in the proposed motion. But I think that has to be addressed by directly tying this truck-to-truck operation to the development of a fuel farm, so that no one in the future could ever come in and say, well, you allowed truck-to-truck here, so I'm just going to start doing it now, because we would have a discrimination case in our hands.
Yeah, I read your list of items and I agree with that. You know, I don't see a problem with that at all. And I don't think they're asking to conduct truck-to-truck transfer in perpetuity, you know, only temporarily until they can get operating. And as Mr. Cost pointed out, there's been substantial money spent already on the part of CTE and Stellar, and it's been a couple of years. You know, I mean, you know, it appears to me that we're on solid ground with the permanent facility. I'm struggling a little bit with why it's a problem with the truck to truck.
Sure, come up so it can be on the record.
And I think our council can correct me if I'm wrong here, but we adopted a quote-unquote mobile fueling policy. We have that somewhere, and it appears to me that's what's being asked for here. You might want to review that policy because there's a significant cost involved to the applicant to do that.
I guess, can I respond to that? Tim?
I'll take my
Sure.
seat. I'm just
Yeah,
saying,
go ahead.
we have a policy for
Right.
this type of an operation. And to address what Harlow had said, no one ever asked Harlow, because it was always mandated in everyone's lease that they construct that facility, just like it's mandated in their current lease that they construct a facility.
I don't know that we know that. That's why nobody ever asked. Yeah.
Sit down. Could we have our airport manager respond first, and then we'll have you?
Absolutely.
All right.
The policy that Michael Golden is referring to is a self-fueling policy. It is specifically for companies who would like to fuel their own aircraft with a mobile refueler. It would not apply to this case.
Thank you, Corey. Go ahead.
Correct. And just one point of clarification, where Mr. Golden said that it is mandated that we build a facility. That is not mandated in the lease. But I appreciate the clarification on the policy issue.
Okay, thank you. Now, and I want to open this up. Any other comments from our board at this moment? With that, no. Is there anybody else in the audience who would like to support or not support this project? I see nobody. What I'd like to ask the board is, would you all agree that I go ahead and do the proposed motion that is in your packet, or would you like me to split it up into two different motions? Does anybody have an appetite to split it up into the truck-to-truck separate from the motion as written? Otherwise, I'm going to propose as written. I want to find, is there anybody? Carl?
And when you say that, you mean the red text in the red text in the packet?
No, the proposed motion on page 111 on the packet that was provided to us for this particular application.
Right, I see it in red in my packet in the recommended motions.
Mine's in black. You're looking at Mr. Takis's suggested revision of the proposal.
Okay, well, it's the only one I could get to load.
Oh.
So I just want to be clear about this. My recommendation would be to separate.
Okay.
Hey, Tim?
I agree.
I would recommend that you separate those motions, but I would recommend that you amend the initial motion to state that that is a temporary facility which will cease activity on a particular date, and the permanent fuel facility will begin operations on that date, so that this is clearly a temporary situation leading to a permanent fuel facility.
I think it's in the motion that way already, isn't it? It does specifically indicate it's temporary. Yes, Mr. Jenkins.
There's actually not a proposed motion that covers both the fuel facility and the truck. There's only a list of conditions that the motion should meet. So I don't believe that you would be able to accept it as written.
Boy, this is going to be challenging then, especially for the rookie interim chair here. Well, let's start off with the proposed motion to.
Mr. Vice Chair,
Yes.
might I make a
Please do.
recommendation?
Please do.
As far as a motion goes, I think you should, the motion should be to approve the CTE temporary truck-to-truck facility, which will end not later than, let's pick a date, at which time CTE will begin operations of a fixed fuel facility as described in their proposal.
Well, I'd like to start with the permanent one first and get that on the record as an approval or denial.
Okay.
And then from there, we'll go back and we'll propose.
Approve their temporary facility.
Unless we have the permanent facility approved, there's no temporary portion of this, so.
Sounds good. That's fine.
Corey, how would you recommend that we put this so it's proper, or Mr. Takis, so that we can make this motion appropriate, the way with the way you have it in red? Or I'm trying to,
This is Corey here. I would definitely recommend all of the conditions that I have listed there. And I think the board should review each of those conditions.
okay,
Um,
so we'll just, the only part of this that would be left out in this first proposal would be the temporary portion, the truck to truck. Is that
Are we
correct?
talking about the red line portion as the motion, or are we talking about that which is in black?
So if you separate the two items, you could accept the motion as written for the bulk fuel facility.
And that's on page 111, right?
11 at the top, right?
Yes.
And then when we do that, we'll vote on that, then we'll move to the next one.
And then you can move to the next one, and that motion will need some work. But
Okay.
all of those conditions should be considered as a portion of that, and the time frame should be
Okay.
defined as well.
Okay, and we're talking 2 years, basically, is what we discussed.
It's 120 days for permits and 2 years for construction to match the language in other leases
All right.
on the airfield.
So, unless I have any other comments, I'm gonna go ahead and make a motion. I move to approve the bulk fuel facility, CTE, as set forth in their engineered plans and exhibits with the compliance requirement. Number one, that copies of the permits from other agencies be provided to the airport manager. Number two, that approvals from the relevant fire officials be obtained and provided to the airport manager prior to the operation of the facility. Three, that the environmental approvals from the relevant agencies be provided to the airport manager prior to operation of the facility. Four, such other permits, approvals, and information recommended by the airport manager. I move to approve the fuel flow rate of 5 cents a gallon for all fuel delivered to the CTE bulk fuel facility.
Second.
I'm not done yet here, let's
Oh.
see.
That would be the end of the motions
That's
for
the
those
end of the
two
motion.
items.
Okay, so I move that. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor of this proposal?
Aye.
Oh, wait,
Aye.
Aye.
well,
Oh, go ahead, Carl.
so in the spirit of, we have a motion and a second, is there any further discussion?
Correct. Is there any further discussion? Hey, I'm new at
I
this.
just would note, I would just note one thing I don't see in those compliance conditions. And that is a specific mention of liability insurance requirements, or for a minimum liability insurance. And I guess I'm going to turn this into a question. Is that because that is sufficiently addressed in the FBO leasehold itself?
That's a legal question.
Honestly, I don't know the answer to that, whether, but I'm sure that the applicant can provide assurances that there's liability insurance in place that will cover the fuel operation. I mean, I think that's probably the way to address it. I'm guessing that because they do it at other airports, they already know what the answer to this question is. So maybe we can get it from them. But yeah, what you're saying is, let's make sure the liability coverage also covers the fuel operation. And I think that's a valid thing to be concerned about, and make sure it's in your list of compliances.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Hutter. Can we add that to this condition, please, for this proposal? Insurance
That would be my suggestion, is to amend the motion to include number 5, maintenance and, proof of coverage of liability insurance for covering the fuel operation at no less than X million dollars, and I don't know what's typical.
Okay, then, yeah, I think that what our airport manager suggests that we leave that amount and the details up to his approval based on his research on what's required for the fuel facility. And this will now be included in this motion.
Great, and I would just suggest for the notes to Corey then that it, of course, in the spirit of economic competitiveness, be no more restrictive or burdensome than that which our current fueling operators have to maintain.
It's agreed. Okay, any other discussion on this? I think we had a second, did we already, or do we have a motion? I made the motion, you had a second? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, passes unanimously. Now, let's get on to the temporary. I need a little guidance on how you guys suggest I would present this, because it's not prepared exactly, so.
Could it be essentially,
Well, we've had all the discussion on it, right? We
Had
brought
all the
it,
discussion,
we
this is
brought
just
it
to make
back
a
to the
motion.
board.
Yeah, correct.
So unless there's further discussion from members of the board, we stand in need of a motion.
Well, we're all in agreement that we're okay with a temporary facility, correct? Until when?
Well,
What's-
no, we
what's
have
the
not.
end date?
Okay, so,
I mean,
Corey,
as a point of discussion,
right.
if we were to approve it, how long would we let it run?
I think we have some dialogue on that already,
Well, until construction is completed within the guidelines already set forth of
which
the
is
permanent
permits
fuel
120
facility.
days. Go ahead, Corey.
I think using language from the staff summary where it states that all permits must be obtained for construction within 120 days, and construction must be completed within 2 years of approval. Additional time may be requested for unavoidable delays out of the control of Carson Tahoe executive, and then tying the temporary fuel to that time frame. So the temporary fuel would then be directly tied to the construction of the fuel farm with that timeline.
The temporary truck-to-truck
Yeah.
operation?
Basically, what it says here is that they have to have it done within 2 years of approval. And that would be the time frame
I think the 120-day portion is also really important.
for the truck to truck.
Because in my other conditions, I state that operations will not begin until after submission for a building permit for the construction of the permanent fuel facility with Carson City. And that would then tie the 120-day requirement to the temporary truck-to-truck, meaning they can't start it until they submit those permits. And I feel like that's really important because that makes it to where they have to apply for permits for the construction of that fuel farm in order to do the truck-to-truck. That protects the airport from future attempts at truck-to-truck, because this would say they're only getting that approval because they've submitted those permits to build that fuel facility. So I think the
Well,
120 days.
Mr. Vice
is
Chairman, let me just read it, okay? Operations will not begin until after submission for a building permit for the construction of the permanent fuel facility with Carson City. Is that what you're referring to?
That is correct.
Okay.
And having that tied to a 120-day requirement does a couple of things. You know, first of all, it makes sure that they will in fact build a fuel farm, but it also makes sure that it happens in a timely manner as well. They can't sit on it for an unknown period of time and provide truck-to-truck services without moving forward on that fuel.
You bet.
Development.
So does that alter item number 4 in that list?
I think that the timeline needs to be added to this list of conditions.
So if you say permanent fuel facility with Carson City within a certain period of time?
So that language, you can pull it directly from the staff summary. That's where all permits must be obtained for construction within 120 days, and construction must be completed within 2 years of approval, and then allowing for additional time to be requested for unavoidable delays out of their control.
because if we're going to read it, we should read it correctly. Let me find it in the summary then.
It's page 110.
110.
Well, these aren't numbered, these are numbered differently, Tim, than the electronic ones.
Oh, yeah.
Have it. I think I have it. Let's see. Okay. I can give it a shot then.
Please do.
Make sure you use temporary and truck to truck in there.
Mr. Vice Chairman, I move to approve the proposal for truck-to-truck transfers and the use of a fuel tanker as a temporary fuel facility. You want me to read all 10 items?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
If the proposal for the truck-to-truck operation is approved, it should be approved subject to the following conditions, which I include in my motion. 1, copies of all permits from other agencies be provided to the airport manager prior to initiating the operation. 2, the approvals from the relevant fire officials be obtained and provided to the airport manager prior to initiating the operation. 3, the environmental approvals from the relevant agencies be provided to the airport manager prior to initiating the operation. 4, operations will not begin until after submission for a building permit for the construction of the permanent fuel facility with Carson City, and all permits must be obtained for construction within 120 days. Construction must be completed within 2 years of approval. Additional time may be requested for unavoidable delays out of the control of Carson Tahoe Executive. 5, only for the duration of the construction of the permanent fuel facility. 6, if construction of the permanent fuel facility ceases for any reason, the approval for the temporary truck-to-truck operation is immediately revoked. 7, execution of a lease amendment to accommodate the truck-to-truck operation if required. 8, the completed truck-to-truck operations manual is submitted and approved by the airport manager. 9, subject to any noise abatement requirements established by the airport manager at any time. 10, CTE must improve any areas the fuel trucks will be operating at their own expense, and any improvements will be subject to the Carson City Airport Authority approval.
Thank you, Mr. Norvell. Any discussion?
I'll second that motion.
Mr. Hutter is second that motion. We'll go ahead and take a vote. All those,
Motion is on the table. So is there any further comment?
any more comment now?
Can I just ask a clarification so I know how we're implementing this? Does that mean that the temporary truck-to-truck transfer can last up to 2 years? Is that what you're voting on?
That's how I read it.
That's a
It
little-
would last as long as the construction of the fuel farm.
Okay. That's a little bit different than what the fire marshal understood when I talked to him, so. He understood that the temporary truck-to-truck would not last any longer than 6 months. Now, I don't know if that's critical to anything. I just want to make sure that it's clear on our record what you're doing.
Comment on that.
I will amend my motion to make item number 4 subject to any regulatory requirements changing the time period.
Okay, any other discussion?
I think maybe the only other thing I heard in the way that Harlow read the original motion, and I don't know, we have a recording there of that, but I heard the word tanker. And I just want to make clear that so that since there's been a little back and forth on this tonight, that it is what is meant in what you said there, Harlow, is that, just as it would come and supply fuel to a permanent fuel facility. A tanker truck will arrive here to put fuel into a fueler truck and then depart the premises.
I eliminated
just-
the word.
I think that's what
I
you're.
eliminated the word trailer because we had
Right.
talked about this. So
Thank you.
this will be a
Awesome.
truck.
Okay, any other comments? All those in favor? Please
Aye.
say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, the motion passes. Mr. Golden?
Tim, I need a short break,
Okay.
about just 2 minutes.
We're going to have a 5-minute break, please.
after 7:30, we're going to bring the meeting back to order, and we'll go right into Corey's report. Airport manager's report, please.
All right, so we don't have much left here. So you all can see the fuel numbers, a big increase over January, still slightly less than last year, and that's due to the weather. But the numbers were actually pretty good considering the amount of weather we did get during this time. So I've been working with the Open House Planning Committee. We have secured portable restrooms for the event. Also, we have completed a flyer, and it is now posted to the website. I'll be using that flyer to begin advertising for the open house event. We've made progress on food vendors, static displays, and youth activities, and I can now add to that a band for the event. We definitely have been doing lots of snow plowing. So we had 4 snow events over this past month. There was 37.5 hours of overtime for these snow events. That's just of one employee, is not accounting all of the overtime. That's just Rick Lee's overtime. We incurred $1,027.32 in fuel expenses. We did have some maintenance but it was all wear and tear, no major failures. We had a couple of the board members volunteer to help with snow plowing. I was actually sick during one of these events, and Tim and Paul stepped up to help out.
Corey, don't forget that we had a near miss.
So there was a near miss during snowplow operations with one of the volunteers. We've addressed that. So the small plow will no longer be operating on the same taxiway as the large plow. So in the future, there won't be an opportunity for that to happen. Yeah, Rick and I are working on like a formal training, and hopefully by next snow season, we've got a really good formal training for the preseason. Where there's definitely be pretty significant changes to the priority maps. We'll have separate priority maps for the different plows, and this will be factored into that, putting the priorities in different locations so the plows aren't in too close proximity to each other, as well as putting the plows to best use in the right priority. For example, the large plow should be doing long straight runs. It should not be wasting time on small intersections. It just needs to move on to the next long straight run, and the small plows need to come in and take care of the intersections. And we're going to address that through the future priority maps. Rick and I are already enacting these plans, which has made enormous differences and reduced our overall time significantly. Putting the big plow to use for what it's meant for is where its priorities need to be. ADSB numbers, total operations 1,733 in February according to the ADSB data, and the detailed charts are below. And I'm available for any questions.
I've got one, Corey. What happened to our AWAS reporting out to the network, and when will that come back?
That's a great question. So that is due to a particular component. It's called the AWAS net. It is a single board computer that is a part of the overall system. We went through some troubleshooting steps and identified a potential of being a power supply issue. We ordered that power supply. It took about 10 days to get it. And we got it. We plugged it in. It worked. It worked longer than normal. We were all excited, and it went out again. So that was not the problem. So now we're replacing the entire device, and that is going to be another delay on shipping. Hopefully it won't be 10 days. Hopefully it's just a few days. Unfortunately, that device is made from a component that is really high demand right now. What we're getting is actually a refurbished unit. It's not actually, it's nearly impossible to get a brand new single board computer right now because the entire circuit board industry is in shambles. So hopefully this refurbished unit that we're getting is going to fix the problem. We are in compliance with all federal regulations right now. Even if you notice, if you view the AWAS webpage, it states at the bottom that it's only advisory, and that if you need to go off of the phone number in order to get information to use for navigation. So it's an inconvenience for pilots, but we're definitely still fully in compliance because the phone number is working and the radio transmission is also working. So that is what's going on with that, and we're well into troubleshooting it, and it should hopefully be up soon. All right. Any more questions?
Thank you.
Hey, thank you, Corey. Legal counsel's report. Steve, you have anything for us?
I have nothing new.
Okay. And John is in absentia. He is not here this evening. I'll give a quick report from my volunteer work a couple weeks ago on a Saturday. I also took to the snowplow, was out there for hours and hours and hours driving around one of the snowplows, and I have great admiration for what Rick and Corey do out there. It takes a lot more time and effort than I would have ever imagined. Now that I have the experience, I really have a great deal of respect for that snow removal operation. I want to commend Paul and Tim also for putting in their volunteer time doing that, because the three of us now really have a lot under our belt and a great understanding of what needs to be done out here in a snow event and what it takes to get that job done. I had something break on the plow, but I didn't break it. So I had a tin break on one of the levelers, and I lifted the plow and the leveler dropped out. Yeah. Any other comments, questions from members of the airport authority?
No
Okay.
more air race parking after this year.
And this is it. Yep. It's going to be a big
That's a hit, boy.
to
That's
this
a big
airport.
hit. Yeah.
Big hit. In any
Glad to hear
event, on that, I don't see any members of the public. Spare Mr. Lewis and Mayor Bagwell. Please. We do entertain public comment. Would you like to have this chair and I can leave? Okay, go ahead, Lori. Thank
For
you for being
tomorrow.
here this evening.
Good evening. I'm Lori Bagwell, Mayor, and I just wanted to have an opportunity to let the Airport Authority know how much I appreciate your service to the city. I know that it's difficult. There's no big pay attached to your hard work, but I enjoyed this evening watching your thought processes and determinations, and I want to thank each and every one of you for doing what you thought was right, right? We don't all have to agree ever. There's no such thing, actually. So, but I thought it was important. I like to try and go to one meeting a year for every board, and I knew this one was a big one that had a meaty issue, so I wanted to attend, and I want to thank you, and I hope that all of you in the end think it was a great decision and that Carson City will be fortunate to maybe have some large investments at the airport. So I'm super excited, and I think the ball will now toss into our side of the court, but it's important that I let you know how much I appreciate each and every one of you. No matter your decisions or your thoughts, they're all important. So I just want to say thank you.
Thank you. I hope you feel also that we collectively manage ourselves in a professional demeanor. That's most important. So, Mr. Lewis, do you have any public comment? Agenda items for our next meeting. I can't think of any. Corey, anything important coming up?
I think that there's a opportunity for a lease amendment to clarify language to allow for what was voted on today. So that's definitely possible.
I'll tell you to work with our legal counsel and get that before us. On that, we're going to adjourn. Thanks again.